Why was she always the smallest presence in the loudest room? The mess deck vibrated with chatter, trays clattering, laughter spilling over the tables like rough seas breaking against steel bulkheads. Sarah Martinez sat alone, eyes low, fork quietly moving through a plate she'd already half finished. She was used to it. The whispers, the sidelong glances, the way people assumed silence meant weakness. At 26, she had long since learned that invisibility could be survival. But tonight, as the crowd swirled around her, she felt it, the familiar shift in air pressure when attention settled where it shouldn't. 4 young sailors closed in. 19, maybe 20. Fresh faces still shining with the arrogance of new uniforms. One slid into the seat across from her without asking, a smirk pinned on like a badge he hadn't earned. His friends flanked him, hemming her into the corner of the small table. "Mind if we join you, sweetheart?" His voice was smooth, rehearsed. Fake charm poured over steel arrogance. Sarah lifted her eyes, calm, controlled. "Thanks, but I prefer eating alone." Her tone was polite, even steady. She learned long ago that the quieter you kept your fire, the more people mistook it for smoke that didn't burn. But arrogance was deaf. "Come on, don't be like that. We're all Navy here. We should stick together." His gaze lingered on her insignia, searching for rank, failing to see what was right in front of him. "What's your rate? Admin? Galley work?" The sting came sharp, though she didn't flinch. How many times had she been written off this way? Too small for combat, too quiet for command, too female for a world that demanded hardness. She stabbed another bite of food, chewing slowly, ignoring the growing laughter around her table. Another leaned forward, freckles scattered across a too young face. "Forget Jake, he's playing nice. What he really wants is to see if you'll grab drinks with us later. There's this spot off base. No IDs, no problem." Sarah set her fork down, her voice lowered, steady but edged like tempered steel. "Not interested." She held each of their gazes, one by one, unshaken. They laughed, a performance for each other. Another elbowed his friend, voice too loud. "She's playing hard to get, guys, I like that. Means she's got standards." He grinned, thinking it charm, thinking her silence was invitation. It was. "New to the ship?" he pressed. "Not exactly," she answered. Her watch ticked quietly against her wrist, a reminder of the time she was wasting. She'd almost risen to leave when Jake, the ringleader, reached across the table and caught her wrist in his hand. Light grip, but insistent. "Wait a minute. At least tell us your name. We're shipmates now. Might as well get acquainted." Sarah's gaze fell to his hand, then back to his face. Her expression did not change, but her eyes sharpened, dark and steady in a way that made the hair on his neck rise before he knew why. "I'd suggest you remove your hand." Her voice barely carried, but something in its weight silenced the air between them. The mess deck roared on around their corner, sailors oblivious, laughter and chatter masking the quiet moment of coiled danger. The oldest of the 4, Danny, quieter, more perceptive, shifted uneasily. "Maybe we should just—" Jake cut him off. "Relax, man, we're being friendly." His grip tightened just enough to prove he hadn't heard her. His grin stayed pasted, but pride had already taken the wheel. "Come on. We're not going anywhere until you give us something. Name, rate, anything." None of them knew the truth. Not the years she'd spent in deserts and frozen forests. Not the nights she'd gone without sleep, listening to her own heartbeat while learning how to kill a man silently in the dark. Not the 8 years of training where being underestimated wasn't a burden, it was her sharpest blade. Her breathing slowed, shoulders relaxed. She looked around the mess deck once more, nodding the eyes that were starting to drift toward them. No one would intervene, not here, not yet. She returned her gaze to the sailor across from her. "My name," she whispered, steady and slow, "is Petty Officer First Class Sarah Martinez." The words hit the table like cold water. Jake's smile faltered. The color drained from the freckled one's face. They knew enough to understand. They had just cornered someone who outranked them by years. But Jake's pride didn't release his grip. "I asked you nicely," Sarah said, voice calm. "Twice, first to leave me alone, then to let go." Her eyes narrowed just enough to cut through him. "You're still not listening." Danny's chair scraped as he half rose, nerves taking over. Jake just let her go, seriously, apologize and walk. But pride was louder than wisdom. Pride with an audience is almost impossible to silence. Jake leaned forward, tightening his hold, his voice rising. "I don't care what rank you are. You're still just a woman. What are you gonna do about it?" The mess deck shifted. Conversation stilled. Phones lifted into discreet hands. Soldiers sensed what was about to unfold. Sarah's breathing stilled into rhythm. Shoulders soft, posture deceptively loose. Calm where others grew tense. Training whispered through her veins. Patience, precision, timing. "You really want to know?" Her voice carried now soft but cutting through the silence like a blade through glass. "I'll give you one final chance. Remove your hand. Walk away." The others felt it. Tom's face drained pale, sweat breaking, Mike froze. Danny's pulse thudded in his temple, but Jake laughed, hollow, forced. "You're threatening me." His pride cornered him worse than his body ever could. He tugged on her wrist, trying to pull her upright, show the crowd he still held power. That was his second mistake. Her free hand moved before the thought formed in his brain. Precision. Lightning. She struck a nerve cluster in his forearm, his grip collapsing instantly. Before he could blink, she had twisted his arm behind his back, slammed his face into the steel tabletop. Trays rattled, utensils clattered. Gasps tore through the mess deck. Phones rose higher now, eyes wide, voices stammered. Jake groaned, pinned and helpless, struggling against pain that would only break him further. Mike rose half an inch, chest puffing. "What the hell?" Her eyes met his, cold, steady, a warning forged by years of combat, the kind of warning that stops men mid-step. "I wouldn't," she said evenly, her grip on Jake unshaken. "Your friend's learning about consequences. You can either watch or join him on this table." Tom and Danny backed off at once, palms raised. "We're good," Danny said quickly. "We don't want trouble." Jake thrashed, humiliated, voice muffled against steel. "Let me go, this is assault. I'll have you court-martialed." Her lips lowered to his ear, her voice low enough for only him. "You grabbed me first. That makes this self-defense. And trust me, you don't want to find out what else I'm capable of." The silence around them deepened. The mess deck had become a stage. 100 eyes bore witness. And yet Sarah's heart didn't thunder. Her breathing didn't quicken. She wasn't fueled by rage or vengeance, only by the quiet, cold necessity of control. A shadow fell over the table. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez. Stern face, gray at the temples, authority carried in the way silence followed him. 2 master-at-arms at his shoulders. "What's going on here?" His voice cut like steel. "Disperse, show over." The crowd shifted reluctantly, whispers breaking into the air like waves retreating from shore. Rodriguez's gaze pinned Sarah. "Petty officer, release him." She obeyed instantly, snapping to attention. Jake stumbled to his feet, clutching his arm, hatred burning his humiliation. "Sir, she assaulted me." Rodriguez's hand cut through the air. "Silence him." Then to the crowd, "Anyone see an unprovoked attack?" A chorus rose instantly. He grabbed her first. She warned him. He wouldn't leave her alone. The commander's jaw tightened. He turned to Jake and his trembling friends. "Report to my office in 1 hour. You're confined to quarters until then. Move." They obeyed, pale and shaken. Jake's glare burning holes in Sarah's silence. Rodriguez lingered. His eyes studied her. Small stature, calm posture, hands still loose at her sides. Something in him recognized the weight of what he'd seen. "Name?" he asked. "Petty Officer First Class Sarah Martinez, sir." "At ease." She shifted slightly, silent under his gaze. "That takedown," his eyes narrowed. "They don't teach that in basic." "No, sir." Her voice stayed calm, unrevealing. Rodriguez's radio crackled, urgent. He turned. "Report to my office tomorrow at 800. We'll discuss further." Then he was gone, his authority trailing behind him. Sarah stood alone again in the near-empty mess deck. Her tray sat cold, meal forgotten. Whispers swirled like smoke around her. She had planned to stay invisible here, to play the quiet, calm specialist no one noticed, but invisibility had shattered in seconds. And though none of them knew it yet, the small woman who had just silenced 4 arrogant sailors was far more than she appeared. She was a ghost, a seal, and her cover was slipping. Why did Rodriguez look at her like he'd seen a ghost? The next morning, Sarah stood outside the lieutenant commander's office at precisely 800, her posture perfect, her heartbeat steady. On the surface she was calm, but inside something coiled tighter with each passing second. A mess deck scuffle she could handle. 100 sailors whispering her name, speculating about her skills. That was dangerous. Attention was her enemy, and attention had found her. "Enter," came the voice. She stepped inside. Rodriguez sat behind his desk, paperwork stacked in neat, disciplined piles. His face was unreadable, eyes sharp. "Petty Officer Martinez." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit." She obeyed. "I reviewed your record last night," he said slowly, folding his hands together. "Impressive. Advanced combat training, multiple deployments, consistently high evaluations." His eyes stayed locked on hers. "But your service history has gaps, long stretches of time without assignments listed. Care to explain?" Sarah's stomach tightened. This was the moment she always dreaded, the weight of secrets pressing against the thin walls of her cover identity. She kept her face neutral, her tone measured. "Some of my assignments required clearance, sir. Classified postings. They won't appear in standard records." Rodriguez leaned back in his chair. He'd seen soldiers bluff. He knew the look of evasion. But Sarah's eyes didn't waver. Her words weren't excuses. They carried the precision of someone used to living half a life in silence. "I don't doubt you," he said finally. "But yesterday that wasn't standard defensive tactics. You executed with the precision of someone who's lived it, day in, day out. That doesn't come from optional courses. That comes from something else." Sarah didn't answer. Silence was safer than lies. Rodriguez sighed. "The 4 sailors from last night have been dealt with. Morrison, Jake, is facing disciplinary action. His friends will receive warnings and training. You won't need to worry about them again." He studied her carefully, like a man piecing together a puzzle where some corners had been burned away. "Understand this, Martinez. Word of what happened spread across the ship before I even left the mess deck. You're not invisible anymore. And how you handle that attention matters. To discipline, to morale, to me." "Yes, sir," she said. He dismissed her with a nod, though his eyes followed her out like shadows trailing in daylight. Back in her narrow berth, Sarah sat on the edge of her rack and pulled out the secure satellite phone hidden beneath her gear. She dialed a number she knew by heart. 3 rings. "Martinez." The voice on the other end was gravel, familiar, carrying calm authority. "Captain James Williams." "Sir," she whispered, making sure no one was near. "My cover just got complicated." She laid out the mess deck incident in clean detail, leaving nothing out. The crowd, the phones, Rodriguez's sharp questions. "How bad?" Williams asked. "No permanent damage, but there were witnesses, at least 100. Rodriguez is suspicious, and I'm due back in his office if things escalate." Williams was silent for a long beat. "Understood. The mission hasn't changed. You're still tasked with monitoring internal comms. The suspected breach is still priority 1. You've got 2 weeks left on that ship. Can you hold your cover?" Sarah's eyes closed for a second, her jaw tight. "Yes, sir, but people are asking questions about my training. I can't explain all of it away." "I'll adjust your file. Add some Krav Maga, advanced defensive tactics, enough to make your takedown believable without breaking cover. If Rodriguez pushes harder, I'll read him in on a need-to-know basis, but only if absolutely necessary. Copy that. And Martinez, Williams' voice softened though only slightly. Don't second-guess yourself. You did the right thing in that mess deck. Remember, your job is survival first, mission second. Sometimes survival means being seen. She let out a slow breath. Yes, sir. The line clicked silent. She slid the phone back beneath her pillow. The silence of the ship pressed in again. That night, she reported to the communications center for her newly assigned shift. Midnight to 800. The room hummed with the low buzz of monitors and electronic static. Rows of screens cast pale light across her face, painting her in blues and grays. Chief Thompson, the burly man in charge of communications, met her at the door. His voice was low, edged with skepticism. Everyone been asking about you, Martinez. Training, ships you've served on. I don't have answers. Makes me look bad. Sarah held his gaze. I keep to myself, Chief, always have. That won't work anymore. You're famous now. His tone was sharper than it needed to be, but not cruel. If you're in my department, I need to trust you. Can I? Yes, Chief. Good, you're on nights. Midnight to 8. Full responsibility for monitoring traffic. Don't screw it up. The assignment was a gift. Nights meant fewer eyes, fewer interruptions. Exactly the window she needed to pursue her real mission. By 200, her fingers moved quietly over the keyboard, eyes darting across streams of coded transmissions. Her training let her see what others would miss. Patterns buried in noise, messages hiding inside messages. And then there it was. A faint anomaly hidden in routine traffic. Someone piggybacking encrypted data onto legitimate comms, sophisticated, inside knowledge required. Her pulse didn't spike. Her breathing didn't change. She simply adjusted her headset, eyes narrowing, tracing the digital breadcrumbs deeper. Whoever it was, they were good, but she was better. Then she heard it, footsteps. Her screen minimized instantly. Routine maintenance logs filled her monitor. She turned, her chair steady, her face calm. The door hissed open. Jake Morrison stood in the frame, his arms still in a sling, his eyes bloodshot, his breath heavy with alcohol. Working late, his smile was brittle. Doing my job, she said, calm, neutral. She shifted subtly, angling herself toward the exit if needed. He stepped further in, letting the door close behind him. The click echoed like a lock. Funny thing about jobs, he said, his voice low, dangerous. I've been asking around about yours. Guess what I found out? Nobody really knows much about you, Martinez. No one knows where you came from or why you're really here. Her jaw tightened. Maybe you should worry about your own problems. His smile twisted. My problem? You humiliated me. In front of the crew, made me look weak. His finger jabbed toward her, trembling with barely controlled anger. That's not something I forget. You embarrassed yourself, Sarah replied evenly. I defended myself when you put your hands on me. He leaned closer, his good hand gripping the edge of her desk. This isn't over. His voice cracked, thick with venom, not by a long shot. The air between them went still. Then he turned, storming out, the door closing behind him with a hiss that felt heavier than steel. Sarah sat motionless. Her breath finally left her in a slow, controlled exhale. The danger on this ship wasn't just foreign. It wasn't just digital. It had a face, a name, and it hated her enough to burn her alive if it got the chance. She turned back to her screen, the anomaly still waiting. And for the first time, Sarah wondered if she could complete the mission without being destroyed from within. Who was watching her from the shadows? 3 nights into the midnight shift, Sarah's eyes burned from scanning endless lines of communication logs. Patterns hid inside patterns. Most of it was noise, routine ship chatter, operational codes, encrypted bursts from allied fleets. But in the middle of the static, she'd begun to see it again. A faint signal, buried like a whisper under thunder. It was subtle, almost too subtle. encrypted data masked within authorized transmissions, piggybacking on legitimate traffic. Whoever was doing it knew the system well. They weren't reckless, they were precise, patient, professional. Sarah leaned back in her chair, staring at the screen, fighting the gnawing weight in her stomach. Someone on this ship was feeding information out. Someone with access to the systems she was now tracing. She pressed deeper, following the digital trail, her fingers gliding across the keys with quiet urgency. And then she froze. Her workstation stuttered, a flicker, too brief for most to notice but not her. She knew the signs. Someone had been here before her. Her pulse slowed, focus sharpening. She pulled up a system log hidden 3 layers down, where only the most advanced operators would think to check. The proof was right there, staring back at her in cold, unblinking lines of code. Monitoring software, military grade, installed less than 72 hours ago, recording keystrokes, capturing screens, tracing everything she touched. She wasn't the hunter anymore, she was the hunted. Sarah's jaw tightened. Her cover was fragile enough, but now, someone knew she was watching, someone knew she didn't belong. Her hand drifted toward the emergency key sequence, fingers hovering. She typed a code burned into her memory, a distress flag buried so deep in the network no ordinary sailor would ever see it. A message slipped through the digital ether, racing toward the only man who could protect her secret, Captain James Williams. But before her encrypted confirmation could even blink back across her screen, the air was split open. The alarm shrieked through the ship. General quarters, all hands man your battle stations. This is not a drill. Red lights washed the corridors. The calm hum of machinery gave way to the chaos of footsteps. Orders barked through steel hallways. The ship had come alive, every man and woman rushing to stations with the urgency of practiced fear. Sarah shoved back from her console, instincts flooding her veins. The comms center exploded in movement. Screens lit up with urgent reports, transmissions pouring in from radar, sonar, tactical. Chief Thompson barreled across the room, barking orders. Martinez, emergency frequency. Monitor and log everything unusual, move. Her hands were already flying before he finished the sentence. Radio chatter surged like a storm tide. Foreign signals. Pings bouncing across their perimeter. A predator in the water circling. Her stomach clenched as she pieced the fragments together. A submarine. Enemy. Close. And worse. The chatter suggested the enemy knew more than they should, more than they could have known without help. The breach she'd been hunting wasn't theory anymore. It was unfolding in real time. She caught it again, an unauthorized transmission, sharp and encrypted. She ripped through the first layer with practiced speed. Her cover couldn't matter now. If she didn't stop this, sailors would die. Chief, she called, voice hard with urgency. Intercept on an unauthorized frequency. Encrypted but live, I'm tracing it now. Thompson leaned over her shoulder, his bulk casting a shadow across her screen. His face hardened as he saw the decoded fragments flash across the monitor. Crew schedules, defensive systems, route projections, all of it bleeding out into hostile hands. His voice dropped to a whisper, "This is treason." Sarah's hands didn't stop. She was past protocol now, past secrecy. Her fingers danced, algorithms firing like rounds in the dark. Encryption walls fell one after another. The message opened up, cold and clear. Detailed intel on the ship, timed transmissions, a mole aboard feeding the enemy everything they needed to know. Her throat went dry. She knew what this meant. Someone wasn't just sloppy, someone was deliberate, someone close. But before she could finish the trace, the door to the comms center slammed open. Rodriguez, 2 armed security personnel at his side. His face was a mask of authority, but underneath it, grim suspicion. Petty Officer Martinez. His voice was iron. "Step away from that console. You're under arrest for suspected espionage." The words hit her like a round to the chest. Around the room, sailors froze. Screens flickered, hands hovered over keyboards, but no one dared move. Sarah turned slowly, her breath steady, though inside, panic whispered sharp and low. Someone had framed her, perfectly, her hidden work, her mysterious past, now this software buried on her station. The pieces were too neat, too damning. "Sir, I can explain," she began. Rodriguez's voice snapped like a whip. "You'll have time to explain during interrogation. Remove her." The armed sailors stepped forward, hands reaching. Sarah's mind raced. Her mission was already compromised, her cover shattered. But if she let them take her now, everything was lost. The spy would slip away. The enemy would get what they came for. Her voice cut through the chaos, sharp and commanding in a way that silenced the room. "Lieutenant Commander, before you do something you'll regret, contact Captain James Williams, Naval Special Warfare Command." Rodriguez's step faltered, his eyes narrowed. "What does special warfare have to do with this?" Sarah's voice was steady now, iron under glass. "Everything. My name is Petty Officer First Class Sarah Martinez, and I'm a Navy SEAL operating under classified orders. I'm here to investigate the breach you just discovered." The silence that followed was absolute. Thompson's mouth fell open. Technicians froze, their screens forgotten. The armed guards hesitated, uncertainty flickering across their faces. Rodriguez stared at her. His suspicion wavered, fought against dawning comprehension. Pieces fell into place, her calm under pressure, her perfect takedown, the hidden gaps in her file. "You're saying you're a SEAL?" he asked, voice low, testing. "SEAL Team 6, Sarah replied without flinching. "I've been here 2 weeks, and you're about to lose the traitor you've been looking for if you don't listen to me right now." Rodriguez's jaw worked, doubt warred with instinct, then finally the smallest nod. "Assuming that's true, do you know who?" Sarah's eyes shifted around the room, faces she had worked beside, trusted. One of them wasn't just watching her. One of them had already tried to bury her alive. And she was about to say his name. What if the traitor was standing right behind her? The room went still as Sarah's eyes swept across the comm center. Every face was tense, waiting for her to speak. She had lived 2 weeks among them, pretending to be nothing more than a quiet specialist. Now the truth was open, and silence hung like a blade suspended above them all. Her voice was calm, deliberate. "It's someone with access to classified networks. Someone who knew my workstation was tracking their activity. Someone who planted monitoring software to make me look like the leak." Her eyes landed on the man looming behind her, the one who had just leaned over her shoulder minutes earlier. "Chief Petty Officer Thompson." The name cracked through the room like a gunshot. Every head turned. Thompson's broad shoulders stiffened. His face blanched to gray, then flushed with sudden heat. "That's ridiculous." His voice rose, defensive but unsteady. "She's lying to cover herself. She's the one caught in the system, breaking encryption she shouldn't even know how to touch. Now she's trying to point the finger at me." Sarah stepped forward, closing the space between them. Her voice was steady, carrying no anger, only certainty. "You were the one who put me on the night shift. You gave me the perfect window to operate without oversight because you thought I'd be the fall guy. You knew the crew would question my skills. You knew Rodriguez would doubt my file. You knew attention would fall on me the moment things went bad. That was your shield, your plan." Thompson's eyes darted, betraying more than words. "She has no proof," he said, but his voice cracked, thin against the silence pressing down on him. "I do." Sarah turned to Rodriguez. "Sir, grant me access to the main server. I can show you the logs." Rodriguez hesitated, tension carved into the lines of his face. This was the moment: trust her or shut her down. He nodded once. "Do it." One of the technicians logged her in. Sarah's fingers flew over the keys, movements precise, deliberate, born from thousands of hours in operations no one aboard this ship would ever hear about. Layers peeled back, systems revealed. She navigated deeper, down to the footprints most never knew existed. There, she pointed to a block of code. 3 days ago, monitoring software installed on my workstation. Look at the access credentials. Rodriguez leaned closer. The tag was clear: Thompson's ID, his clearance, his name. The room's silence cracked with whispers. The sailors had their proof. Thompson's face went pale, sweat breaking on his temple. He tried again, but the words rang hollow. Those credentials could have been stolen. Sarah cut him off, her tone hardening. Then explain why the same credentials were used to access classified files an hour later. The same files transmitted on the unauthorized frequency we intercepted tonight. Rodriguez's face darkened. His hand lifted, signaling the two armed guards. Thompson's survival instincts ignited. He moved toward the door in a sudden, desperate burst, but the guards were ready. They blocked his path, weapons raised. The comms center pulsed with tension, sailors holding their breath as the truth cracked open in front of them. "Chief Petty Officer Thompson," Rodriguez said formally, his voice a hammer against steel. "You are under arrest for espionage and treason against the United States Navy." The words landed heavy. The betrayal in them was worse than any weapon. The guards restrained Thompson, his hands twisting as they locked him down. He struggled, shouting over the room. "You think you're safe because you caught me. You don't even know what's coming. You have no idea who you're really fighting." His words echoed like poison before he was dragged out, his voice fatting into the steel corridors. The silence left behind was heavier than the noise. Sarah stood still, her breathing calm, though inside something fractured. She had seen betrayal before, but betrayal inside your own ship, in a man everyone trusted, carried a weight different than combat. This wasn't the enemy across the line. This was family. Rodriguez finally turned to her, his eyes steady, a mix of apology and respect. "How long have you known?" Sarah's jaw tightened. "I suspected him yesterday. I couldn't prove it until tonight. He panicked when I got too close. That's when he made mistakes." "What gave him away?" She pulled up another screen, showing the activity logs. The software he used. It wasn't standard. It was high-grade, the kind of thing a regular comms chief wouldn't even know existed. And he knew where to look in my system, which meant he was watching me in real time. Rodriguez shook his head in quiet disbelief. So the mess deck, all of it, was just bad timing. Sarah allowed herself the faintest smile. "Maybe not. If I hadn't been noticed, he wouldn't have panicked. Sometimes visibility forces the enemy into mistakes." Rodriguez's gaze lingered on her. There was no more suspicion, only the realization of who she really was. The calm, quiet sailor was gone. Before him stood a SEAL who had just pulled a traitor out from the walls of his own ship. The other sailors stared at her, wide-eyed, whispers tumbling through the room like low surf. Their quiet petty officer wasn't who they thought. She was something else, something rare. And in that moment, Sarah felt the loneliness of truth. Because the more they knew about her, the further she would be forced away from them. She couldn't stay. Not here, not as herself. But the mission wasn't done yet. The enemy had their hands in this ship for months. Thompson had been their conduit, but he wasn't the architect. Somewhere beyond the horizon, someone was waiting for his next message. Rodriguez leaned closer, his voice low. "What happens now?" Sarah's eyes returned to the screen, to the shadow of encrypted trails still winding their way across the digital ocean. "Now," she said softly, "we find out who he was working for, before they find us." Why did betrayal always feel heavier than bullets? The comms center was quieter now, though the hum of electronics still filled the air. Thompson was gone, dragged away in restraints, but his shadow remained. Sarah could feel it in the faces around her, the young sailors starring, whispering in low voices, not just about her, but about him. The man who had led them, trained them, joked with them over coffee, was now branded a traitor. Rodriguez stood with his arms folded, eyes locked on the frozen doorway where Thompson had been taken. For a long moment he didn't speak. Then he exhaled slowly, the weight of command pressing down on his shoulders. "I've seen a lot in 20 years," he murmured. "But this," he shook his head. He was supposed to be one of the steady ones, a chief. Sarah didn't answer. She'd seen it before. Men who looked steady on the outside, hollow inside. Warriors who could fight enemies in combat but couldn't fight their own debts, their own demons. Rodriguez finally turned to her. "What do you think drove him to it?" Sarah's eyes lingered on the monitor where fragments of intercepted transmissions still scrolled. Desperation, greed, maybe fear, doesn't matter. He chose to trade loyalty for survival, and when that choice is made, it poisons everything. An hour later, she sat across from Rodriguez in his office, files scattered across the desk between them. Thompson's life in fragments, bank records, disciplinary notes, old evaluations. Rodriguez tapped one paper with his finger. Gambling debts, heavy. Looks like he owed money to the wrong people, offshore accounts. He was cornered. They dangled cash, maybe leverage. He took it. Sarah kept her face composed, though inside she felt the quiet ache of inevitability. That's all it takes. One weak link, one man's desperation, and it puts an entire ship, an entire crew in the crosshairs. Rodriguez studied her. "You've seen this before." Her silence was answer enough. The ship itself seemed heavier that night. Word had spread fast. Sailors whispered in passageways, conversations breaking off when Sarah passed. Some looked at her with gratitude, others with fear, none with indifference. She walked the narrow corridor back toward her berth, the steel walls pressing close. Voices echoed faintly behind her, young sailors hushed. "Did you hear? She's not just comms, she's something else." "She caught him, Thompson, can you imagine?" "She scares the hell out of me." Sarah slipped into her rack, pulled the curtain closed, and lay staring at the steel above her. Silence pressed in. She thought of Thompson, the way he had looked when she named him. The denial, the fear, the moment his mask cracked. Betrayal never came clean. It always carried pieces of humanity that made it sting. He hadn't just betrayed the Navy. He'd betrayed the sailors who trusted him, the young ones who would spend years wondering if the people above them could ever be believed again. She closed her eyes. Sleep didn't come. The next morning, Rodriguez summoned her back to the comm center. His face was sharper now, hardened by decisions made overnight. A new edge to his voice. "Martinez, Thompson's transmissions weren't one-offs. We've traced at least 6 months of activity. He's been feeding someone consistent intel, defensive grids, crew rotations, routes." He leaned forward, his voice lowering. "Whoever was on the other end, they're not going to stop just because he's in custody. They're out there, waiting." Sarah nodded, "Which means they know he's been burned, and they'll act before the window closes." Rodriguez's jaw tightened. "Exactly." The enemy sub still lurked beyond the horizon, its shadow a constant reminder. The sea was vast, but too many signals whispered that something was closer than anyone wanted to admit. That night the ship moved under red-lit corridors, tension humming like static through the steel decks. Sarah stood on the outer deck for the first time since the incident, staring into the endless dark of the ocean. The stars glinted cold above her, the sea a mirror swallowing all sound. She gripped the railing, letting the cold salt air cut through her lungs. She remembered training nights when instructors had forced her to tread water in black seas, whispering, "Trust the silence. It tells you when danger's near." Now the silence pressed heavy, and she could feel it, something unseen moving beneath the waves, circling. Footsteps approached behind her. She didn't turn until Rodriguez stopped at her side. He rested his hands on the railing, eyes scanning the same black horizon. "You saved us," he said softly. Sarah shook her head. "Not yet." He glanced at her. "Most people wouldn't have seen it. Thompson, the patterns, the way you did. I've been on ships long enough to know your kind of calm under fire doesn't come from calm school. She gave the faintest smile. No, sir, it doesn't. Rodriguez let the silence stretch before speaking again. I don't know how long you'll stay, or if I'll ever even hear the truth about what you really are, but whatever the case, this ship owes you. Sarah's eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. This ship doesn't owe me anything. The men and women who serve it do so with honor. They didn't fail. She paused, her voice quiet but certain. One man did. Rodriguez studied her in the dim red light. There was something in her tone that carried both steel and sadness, the sound of someone who had seen too many fractures in the places trust should have held. When he left her alone again, Sarah stayed at the railing long into the night. The waves whispered against the hull, and somewhere out there, she knew, the enemy was listening too. Inside, the comm center still buzzed with cleanup. Thompson's files had been locked, evidence secured. But Sarah knew betrayal left cracks that weren't easily sealed. The crew would carry this for years. And she carried it too, because the hardest part wasn't stopping a traitor. It was facing the silence after, when everyone realized the enemy hadn't come from outside the wire, but from within. She returned to her console just before dawn, hands steady on the keys. The signals were still out there. The enemy hadn't gone away. They were waiting, listening, circling. And Sarah Martinez knew this. Thompson's betrayal was only the beginning. How close was the enemy now? The sea was calm at dawn, its surface smooth as glass, but beneath the stillness, Sarah could feel it, the weight of something hidden. A predator circling in silence. The ship cut forward, gray steel slicing the ocean. Sailors moved about their routines with a different edge now. Conversation was shorter. Smiles were fewer. Even laughter sounded forced, brittle at the edges. Thompson's betrayal had cracked something invisible, and though he was gone, suspicion lingered like smoke. By mid-morning, the tension turned real. Contact, the sonar operator's voice broke through the ship's comms. Possible submarine bearing 280, range 5 nautical miles, depth uncertain. The klaxon blared. All hands, general quarters. All hands, general quarters. This is not a drill. The corridors lit red. Sailors sprinted to stations, boots pounding steel decks. The ship became a hive of controlled urgency, every man and woman falling into the rhythm they had drilled for, but this time the edge was different. This time the enemy was real. Sarah was already in the comm center, headset pressed tight, screens glowing against her face. Rodriguez stormed in seconds later, his jaw clenched, eyes already calculating. Report, he snapped. Unidentified sub, close proximity. We're getting chatter on encrypted frequencies, Sarah said, her fingers flying across the keys. Same pattern Thompson used to transmit, which means they're listening. They know we know. Rodriguez's hand gripped the back of her chair, his voice low. Then this isn't just a tale. They're positioning. Sarah's eyes narrowed at the data streaming in. More than that, they're probing, testing how close they can get before we react. The ship rocked slightly, a subtle shift in the sea. Not an attack, not yet, but a reminder the hunter was near. Orders crackled across the bridge, defensive stations manned, depth charges primed, but no one wanted to be the first to strike. The balance was fragile, one wrong move could ignite fire in the water. Sarah pulled up another stream, isolating signals with the precision of a surgeon. Her training came alive in her hands, instincts honed in missions she could never speak of. She caught the faintest echo of a message and froze. They're not just tracking us, she whispered. They're coordinating. Rodriguez bent closer. With who? Her chest tightened. Another vessel, maybe more than one. The blood drained from his face. An ambush. Sarah didn't look up. Not yet. They're waiting for confirmation. Waiting to see how rattled we are after losing Thompson. Rodriguez's voice dropped to a growl. They think we're blind. The ship shuddered suddenly, a low thump. the kind that vibrates through steel. Gasps rippled through the comms center, sailors gripping consoles, eyes wide. Sarah's heart slowed, not sped. Training locked her down. She knew the sound, not a strike. A warning, a torpedo dropped but wide, a message, we're here. Rodriguez steadied himself, eyes on her. Martinez, what do you read? Her gaze swept the screens. They want us to flinch. They're testing our resolve. If we break formation, if we scatter, they'll close in. She exhaled slowly, words measured. But if we hold, they'll wait. Rodriguez studied her for a moment, then nodded. Bridge, maintain course. Do not engage unless confirmed hostile. A tense silence filled the comms center. Sailors exchanged looks, disbelief, fear, questions unspoken. Holding steady against a predator went against instinct, but orders were orders. Minutes dragged like hours. The hum of machines filled the air, punctuated by the occasional ping from sonar. Sarah kept her eyes locked on the streams, following the patterns. Sweat ran down her back, though her face remained still. Inside, doubt whispered. If she was wrong, lives would be lost. If she misread the signals, if the sub was readying to fire for real. Stay calm, trust the silence, trust the pattern. Her instructor's voice from years ago echoed through her mind, training grafted into muscle memory. Another ping, another shadow at the edge of detection. The enemy was still there, still circling, but waiting. Sarah leaned back just slightly, her breath controlled. They're not firing yet. Rodriguez nodded once, then neither are we. The standoff held, steel against silence, a ship full of hearts pounding against the ocean's steady calm. Hours later, the alert shifted down. The official call went out. Threat contained, maintain readiness. But no one on board believed it was over. That night Sarah walked the narrow corridors. Faces turned as she passed. Some eyes carried respect, others unease, a few fear. She wasn't invisible anymore. She found herself back on the outer deck, the sea stretching endless under the stars. She gripped the railing, staring into the dark. Jake Morrison's words returned, unbidden. This isn't over. He was still on board, still nursing humiliation, pride, rage. And now, with the ship under threat, unstable men became dangerous men. Behind her, footsteps again. She turned ready, but this time it was Jake. Rodriguez approached, his expression carved by exhaustion and resolve. He joined her at the railing, silent for a long moment before speaking. You were right about everything. Thompson, the sub, the signals. Without you, we'd be blind out here. Sarah's jaw tightened. You won't always have me, you know that. He studied her. Maybe not, but tonight you're here, and that matters. For the first time since her cover broke, Sarah let herself breathe deeply, the salt air cutting through her chest. The ocean stretched before her, vast and silent, hiding threats in its depths. Betrayal had already cut them once, but the real fight was still ahead. And Sarah knew this truth. Sometimes the enemy wasn't just in the water or in encrypted signals. Sometimes it was standing across the mess deck, wearing the same uniform. What happens when the enemy outside isn't the only one you have to fight? The red-lit corridors pulsed like arteries through the ship, every bulkhead alive with whispers of tension. Hours after the submarine's first warning pass, the crew remained at half-breath, not relaxed, not ready, caught in the cruel middle where silence screamed louder than gunfire. Sarah walked those corridors like a ghost. Sailors still stole glances as she passed. Some nodded faint respect, others looked away too quickly. Her cover was broken, her story fractured. The small comms specialist was gone. In her place stood someone they didn't understand, someone they feared almost as much as they respected. But one gaze carried no respect at all. Jake Morrison. She caught him in the galley corridor, his arm still in a sling but his pride unbandaged. His eyes burned with something uglier than anger, humiliation, the kind of wound pride alone cannot heal. Enjoying the attention, his voice was low, mocking. Everyone whispering your name, hero of the mess deck, savior of the ship, feels good, doesn't it? Sarah stopped, her body relaxed, but her eyes locked on him. Walk away, Morrison. But he didn't. He stepped closer, his voice tightening. You think you're untouchable because Rodriguez trusts you, because you humiliated me in front of everyone. His lips curled. You're not untouchable, you're just a woman who got lucky. For a heartbeat, Sarah saw him as he really was, a boy wearing a man's uniform, desperate to prove himself, drowning in his own insecurities. But insecurity mixed with anger could be more dangerous than any enemy sub. She lowered her voice, calm as ice. The only thing standing between you and disaster is your ability to shut your mouth right now. Don't push past it. His jaw clenched, but he didn't answer. His good hand balled into a fist, trembling with restraint he didn't have the courage to break. Finally, he spat the words like poison. This isn't over. Then he turned, disappearing down the corridor. Sarah's stomach tightened, not with fear, with certainty. Jake's pride wasn't finished with her, and men like him, cornered by shame, were unpredictable. Hours later, as the ship pressed on through the vast Pacific night, the enemy returned. The sonar alarm cut through the comm center, sharp, urgent. Contact submarine closing, range 3 nautical miles. The deck vibrated with the rush of activity. Orders barked, keys hammered. Rodriguez burst into the room, his face set like stone. Report. Sarah's eyes raced across the screens, the data streaming like frantic heartbeat rhythms. It's them, same signature, they've closed distance, aggressive approach. The ship shuddered with a low, hollow thump. This time it wasn't a warning, the sound of water displaced by something heavy, deliberate. Torpedo in the water. The words crashed like thunder. The ship tilted as sailors grabbed for rails, alarms screaming through every bulkhead. Evasive maneuvers, hard to port. Rodriguez's voice cut through chaos. The vessel groaned as it turned, engines straining, steel bones creaking under the sudden shift. The torpedo passed wide, a ghost brushing the hull, close enough to taste death, not close enough to bite. Sarah's breath was steady, her hands a blur over the console. They're not retreating, they'll fire again, and they're not alone. Her screen pulsed with a second signal, another predator in the water. 2 subs, she said, her voice low but clear. They're boxing us in. The crew froze for half a heartbeat, eyes wide, the realization heavier than the steel they stood in. Rodriguez slammed a hand down. Then we fight. Orders rippled through the comms, countermeasures deployed, depth charges primed. The ship braced for combat. And that was when Sarah noticed it, a flicker across her console, not enemy, internal. Someone had accessed navigation overrides. Someone inside the ship was tampering with systems in the middle of a firefight. Her pulse spiked, but not from fear, fury. She tore into the logs, following the trail, and her gut sank when the ID flashed on her screen. Morrison. Sir, she snapped. Internal sabotage, navigation access, Morrison's credentials, he's interfering. Rodriguez's face hardened. Find him now. Sarah was already moving out of her chair down the corridor, boots pounding steel. The ship tilted under her as another evasive maneuver threw her against the wall. She caught herself, pushed on, breath steady, legs driving. She found him near the auxiliary control bay, his good arm hammering at a console, sweat pouring down his face. Step away, Morrison. Her voice cut through the clang of alarms. He turned, wild-eyed, caught between rage and panic. You don't get it. You made me a joke. Everyone laughs at me because of you. I'll prove I'm not weak. I'll show them. You're not proving strength, Sarah said, her voice low, steady, deadly calm. You're proving betrayal. His eyes narrowed, trembling on the edge of collapse. Behind them, the ship rocked with another thunderous boom, countermeasures detonating against the unseen subs. The deck shook. The lights flickered. You don't understand. Morrison's voice cracked, high with desperation. They promised me. They told me if I helped, if I fed them your name, your movements. Her heart clenched cold. He wasn't just angry, he wasn't just reckless. He had been talking to them. The enemy outside wasn't just hunting them blind. They had another crack inside. Sarah stepped closer, her eyes locked on his. What did you give them? He shook his head violently, panic flooding his face. Just enough. They wanted to know why you were here. They knew you weren't who you said you were. I didn't tell them everything. Her stomach twisted. He had been feeding their suspicions. He had painted a target on her back before she even realized it. You don't know what you've done, she said quietly. The ship lurched again, the deep sound of an explosion reverberating through the hull. Morrison's hand hovered over the console, ready to sabotage again. His eyes darted, wild, cornered. They'll win anyway. Nothing you do will stop them. Sarah moved, fast, precise. Her hand struck his wrist, slamming it against the steel console, the sound sharp as bone. Her other arm swept him down, pinned in a lock he couldn't break with his single good arm. Listen to me. Her voice cut like cold steel in his ear. Strength isn't proving yourself by destroying others. It's carrying weight without breaking. You failed, and now you'll live with it. He fought weakly for another second, then crumbled under her grip, breath ragged, face wet with sweat and shame. Security arrived seconds later, hauling him away. His protests echoed down the corridor, cracked and broken. Sarah stood alone in the bay, chest rising, the ship's alarm still screaming around her. She closed her eyes just for a moment. Thompson, now Morrison. The enemy didn't always need to fire torpedoes. Sometimes they just had to whisper in the right ear. She returned to the comm center, her steps steady. Rodriguez turned as she entered, his face pale, sweat beading at his temple. Well, Morrison done, she said. He was feeding them scraps, enough to make me a target, enough to put us all at risk. Rodriguez's face darkened with fury, then steadied. We'll deal with him, but right now, his voice lowered, hard as steel. We've got 2 subs circling and I don't think they're done playing. Sarah took her seat, headset settling once more. Her hands hovered above the console, her heartbeat steady again. She had put down one traitor, stared another in the eye. But outside, in the black silence of the sea, real enemies still waited. And when they struck, there would be no room left for mistakes. How long could one ship hold its breath before the ocean swallowed it whole? The alarms never stopped. Red lights pulsed through the comms center, painting every face in the same pale urgency. Screens glowed with chaotic signals, enemy frequencies bouncing, sonar pings colliding, echoes of death moving beneath the waves. Sarah's headset crackled with frantic voices. Torpedo in the water confirmed this time, 2 incoming, range closing fast. The room jolted as the ship swung hard, steel groaning under the strain. Every man and woman aboard felt the tremor in their bones. Deploy countermeasures. Rodriguez's voice cut through the chaos, sharp as a blade. The deck vibrated as charges were released, exploding in the black water, shockwaves rolling back through the hull. One torpedo detonated prematurely, its deadly force diffused into bubbles and noise. The other kept coming. Sarah's eyes locked on her screen, watching the signal streak closer, closer. Brace! The impact came like a fist through the hull. Steel screamed. The ship shuddered, lights flickering, sparks raining from overhead panels. The floor pitched, sailors thrown against consoles, hands scrambling to hold on. For a breathless second, it felt like the ocean had swallowed them. Then the ship steadied, wounded but alive. Damage reports flooded the comms, bulkhead breaches sealed, minor flooding contained, casualties minimal for now. But the enemy wasn't finished. Sarah's fingers flew, her breath calm even as the room pulsed with panic. They're repositioning, coordinated. One sub on our port side, the other circling starboard. They're driving us into a kill box. Rodriguez's jaw clenched. Options. Sarah's voice stayed even though inside she felt the ache of the impossible. We don't outrun them. We don't outgun them. Only chance is to make them overplay. Rodriguez stared. Explain. She turned to him, eyes sharp. They think we're blind. Let them. Feed them false transmissions. Make them think we're crippled, turning into their path. Draw them in. Then hit back where they don't expect it. The silence after her words was heavy. Risky didn't even cover it. Rodriguez exhaled, then nodded once. Do it. Sarah bent to her console, fingers flying, feeding decoys into the stream. Messages disguised as desperate crew chatter, fabricated navigation errors, phantom course adjustments. To the enemy, it would look like a wounded ship limping blindly into the trap. The sonar confirmed it. The subs adjusted, closing, eager to finish what they started. Range tightening, the sonar operator called out. They're moving in fast. Sarah's stomach tightened, not with fear, with anticipation. Timing mattered more than firepower. One breath too soon and they'd waste their shot. One breath too late and the ship would break. Rodriguez's voice rumbled low. Stand by, stand by. The pings grew louder, closer, like footsteps in the dark. Sarah's pulse slowed, her training taking over, every nerve tuned to the rhythm of danger. Now, she shouted. Depth charges roared from the ship, plunging into the black. A heartbeat later, the ocean erupted. The first detonation hammered the port side, shockwave crushing steel below. The second found its mark, the enemy sub too close, too greedy, too certain. The explosion ripped through the water, splitting silence into thunder. Cheers erupted in the comms center, sailors pounding consoles, relief flooding through voices strained tight with fear. But Sarah didn't cheer. Her eyes stayed locked on the screen, watching the second signal, the other sub still circling, still alive. Her voice cut through the celebration like a blade. It's not over. The room fell silent again, every face turning toward her screen. The remaining sub shifted, backing off, its signal fading. But Sarah knew the truth. It wasn't retreating, it was waiting. Hours passed under strained silence. The crew rotated through stations, exhaustion carving lines into young faces. The ship moved steady, engines pushing them through the vast sea. Rodriguez stood beside Sarah, his voice low. They'll be back. She nodded. Predators don't walk away from blood. By dawn, the ocean was calm again, too calm, and that silence was worse than alarms. Sarah stepped out onto the deck, the cold air hitting her face. The sun bled over the horizon, painting the sea gold. She gripped the railing, staring into endless water, and felt the weight press down. Thompson's betrayal, Morrison's sabotage, the subs still circling like sharks unseen. Behind her, the thunder of rotors split the air. A helicopter swept across the horizon, closing fast. The insignia on its side made her chest tighten. Extraction. She turned as it descended, its downdraft whipping her hair, its shadow falling across the deck. Rodriguez stood at her side, his expression unreadable. "This your ride?" he asked, though he already knew. Sarah nodded, time to disappear. He studied her in silence. For what it's worth, it was an honor. She met his gaze. The honor was mine. As she stepped toward the chopper, sailors gathered on deck, watching. Most still didn't know who she really was. Maybe they never would. To them, she would remain the quiet, petty officer who turned out to be something far more. Jake Morrison was among them, his arms still in a sling, guarded now, his eyes filled not with rage but confusion. He would never know how close he had come to destroying more than just his own career. Sarah climbed into the helicopter, settling into the seat as the deck fell away beneath her. She looked down at the ship, steel and salt and blood, carrying men and women who would continue their mission long after she was gone. They would tell the story, of course. Stories always spread. The quiet woman on the mess deck, the takedown no one expected, the traitor unmasked, the fight against unseen enemies in black water. Most of the details would twist with time, but the truth, the heart of it would remain. That sometimes, the most dangerous people are the ones no one suspects. The helicopter banked, the ship shrinking against the vast ocean. Sarah leaned back, the weight of secrecy settling on her shoulders again. Tomorrow she would be invisible. Another assignment, another cover, another war fought in silence. But tonight, for just a moment, she allowed herself to breathe. Because survival wasn't about proving strength. It was about carrying the weight quietly without breaking. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.